Hi everyone, welcome back to my educational channel on biology. I'm teacher Janet and we are going to start chapter 3, Nutrition in Plants, for the Form 5 biology syllabus. Now, videos on chapter 2 are still being produced. So that's because chapter 2 is a long chapter. So because of that, I have decided to start chapter 3 first. Alright, but videos on chapter 2 like transpiration, topic of transpiration, are still being prepared and will be uploaded also later on. Right, let's go to chapter 3, Nutrition in Plants, subtopic 3.1, main inorganic nutrients. So in this video, we're going to discuss the main inorganic nutrients, or the macronutrients and micronutrients, or the mineral elements that are needed by plants for their growth and development, such as calcium, sulfur, phosphorus, nitrogen, magnesium, and potassium. So we're going to discuss the functions of these elements or these mineral ions, and then also be able to predict what happens if there's a deficiency of any of these nutrients in the soil. All right, for example, here you see a symptom of a deficiency in one nutrient, in the type of nutrient. So what is the nutrient that's lacking? Let's find out more, and at the end of this chapter you should be able to analyze and tell me what this symptom is and what nutrient is lacking. So the learning standards for this lesson are as follows. Okay, first of all, we should be able to identify the macronutrients and micronutrients required by plants. Examples of macronutrients are calcium, sulfur, nitrogen, and so forth. Then we should be able to justify the necessity of macronutrients and micronutrients in plants. That means, what is the importance of these nutrients? What are the functions of these nutrients? And also, what are the symptoms of deficiency or lack of these nutrients in the plant? Here is an overview of chapter 3. So firstly, we're going to discuss the main inorganic nutrients which are needed by the plants for healthy growth and development. These include the macronutrients and the micronutrients. Macronutrients are needed by the plants in larger amounts. These include carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, potassium, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, and sulfur. Micronutrients are needed by the plants in smaller amounts. These include chlorine, iron, manganese, boron, zinc, copper, nickel, and molybdenum. Now, in the second video, we'll be discussing the organ for water and mineral salts uptake. This is the root. So we're going to discuss the external structure of the root and then the internal structure of the root. In the third video, we'll discuss diversity in plant nutrition, and we're going to talk about 3 types of plants that obtain their nutrients in different ways. Carnivorous plants can digest insects and other animals. These include the pitcher plant and the Venus flytrap. Parasitic plants live on other living plants, and these parasitic plants, examples are Rafflesia, mistletoe, and dodder. Now, then we have the epiphytic plants that achieve a higher height by growing on trees so that they can obtain more sunlight for photosynthesis. Okay, so these are the bird's nest fern and orchid plant. Let's start off by discussing the main inorganic nutrients. Now, like other living things, plants also need nutrients to grow well and produce high quality yields. So they need inorganic nutrients such as the mineral elements to produce organic compounds such as carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and so forth. So what is the meaning of this word, inorganic nutrients? They're actually the mineral nutrients that are essential chemical elements required by plants to achieve optimal growth and development, right? And there are 2 types based on the quantity required by the plants. So the 2 types of inorganic nutrients are macronutrients. These are elements required in larger amounts. For example, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus. K is for potassium. It comes from the other name, kalium, right? And then calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. Okay, think of the acronym Megan's pink chalks. MD for magnesium, P for phosphorus, N for nitrogen, K for potassium, C for carbon, H for hydrogen, O for oxygen. The other C is for calcium, and S is for sulfur. Megan's pink chocolates, chocks are chocolates, pink colored chocolates. So These are the macronutrients that are required in larger amounts by the plants for their growth and development. Then we have the micronutrients. Okay, the word micro means small, right? Okay, smaller amounts. There are elements required in smaller amounts. Okay, a macro means big, so there are elements required in larger amounts. Now the micronutrients are required in small amounts. They include boron, copper, ferrum, manganese, molybdenum, zinc, chlorine, and Ni stands for nickel. Okay, Ni, whereas N alone stands for nitrogen. So N is the macronutrient, but Ni is a micronutrient. So here again, we see the list of macronutrients and the list of micronutrients, which are all considered inorganic nutrients that are needed by the plant. And our memory tip is Megan's pink chalks. M for magnesium, and Mg for magnesium, then P for phosphorus, N for nitrogen, K for potassium, C for carbon, H hydrogen, O oxygen, C for calcium, and S for sulfur. Okay, so altogether there are 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 macronutrients that we need to know. All right. Now, where do plants get their macronutrients and micronutrients? For the three main macronutrients, which are carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, CHO, they are obtained easily from the air in the form of carbon dioxide, okay, which supplies the carbon, oxygen, and then from water, H2O, which supplies the hydrogen ion, okay. So the water is absorbed by the roots from the soil. And then for carbon dioxide, it diffuses into the leaves via the stomata, right? So these two inorganic compounds, carbon dioxide and water, are involved in the process of photosynthesis to help the plants produce glucose. And then from glucose, we have the other organic compounds that are formed, such as proteins and lipids, right? So all these organic compounds like carbohydrates, protein, and lipids, they have the elements C, H, and O in them. They actually originates or come from the carbon dioxide in the air and water from the soil. Now, so plants rarely experience the lack of these nutrients because they are easily available in the environment, right? Now, these nutrients then make up most of the dry mass of the plants, for example, in the leaves, stems, and roots. Now, the remaining nutrients, which are the mineral ions, such as magnesium, P for phosphorus, N for nitrogen, K, potassium, calcium, and sulfur, they are taken in the form of mineral salts, which are dissolved in the soil when fertilizers are used, all right? Or when there is decaying leaves, there are decaying leaves and organic matter in the soil that break down and then release these mineral ions back into the soil. Okay, so fertilizers like ammonium-based fertilizers can supply nitrogen to the soil. Okay, and phosphate or nitrate ions can be supplied to the soil through in the chemical fertilizers. So these will supply different mineral ions to the plant. Okay, for example, phosphates supply phosphorus and nitrates supply nitrogen. So every nutrient has its own function in order to ensure that plants complete their life cycle and achieve optimum growth and development. Okay, every macronutrient and micronutrient have their own functions, has its own function, which we'll discuss in a short while. The lack of one or more macronutrients or even micronutrients can cause bad effects on the health and growth of plants. This is similar to humans, right? We also need certain nutrients like calcium for the bones and iron or ferrum for the blood, okay, for to produce hemoglobin. So the lack of these nutrients in our diet can also cause deficiency, effects of deficiency, okay? So same for plants. Now let us discuss the functions and effects of macronutrient deficiency, and let us identify the various macronutrients and also micronutrients. So our first topic is on macronutrients. What are their functions and the symptoms of deficiency? So as we have learned just now, the memory aid to remember the macronutrients is Megan's pink chalks. Mg for magnesium, P and K. So P for phosphorus, K for potassium, and then N is for nitrogen. CHOX, C is for carbon, H for hydrogen, O for oxygen, the other C is for calcium, and S is for sulfur. So before we begin talking about the macronutrients, here is a very useful chart for you which shows you the composition of various organic compounds in cells and in plant cells too, right? Animal cells and plant cells. So these compounds, some of them have been discussed in Form 4, Chapter 4 topic called the chemical composition in a cell, where we discussed the composition of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids, right? So you can refer back to this chapter if you have forgotten the chemical composition of these organic compounds. So we are going to do a recap from Form 4, Chapter 4, right? And also we also add in here ATP and chlorophyll. What are the elements found in that? Now, for carbohydrates, what is the composition of carbohydrates? Carbohydrates contain the elements CHO, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. All right. And for proteins, they contain CHON, N is nitrogen, and they may have phosphorus or sulfur in them, okay, in the molecule. Now, for lipids, they contain CHO, and then we have N and P, all right, nitrogen and phosphorus. Nucleic acids have CHON and P. Remember, the nucleic acids are DNA and RNA, and they consist of the nucleotides, and the basic unit are the nucleotides, which have three parts: the phosphate group, the sugars, and then the nitrogenous base. So nitrogenous base has the N, nitrogen, and phosphate group has the P, all right, phosphorus. ATP contains the same elements as for the nucleic acids, CHO and P. Remember, ATP is adenosine triphosphate. Okay, it has the P in it, the phosphate group. In the phosphate group, it has phosphorus in the phosphate group. Now, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll. Now, here is an interesting fact. The formula for chlorophyll A is 6C55H72O5, N for Mg, magnesium. Okay, so chlorophyll contains these elements, CHON and Mg in it. Let's look at the first few macronutrients: carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen, or CHO. So CHO, they are components in the carbon cycle. Now, the carbon cycle is the circulation of carbon in its various forms, such as carbon dioxide and glucose, organic compounds like glucose and proteins, through nature. How the carbon is circulated through nature, right? And then you also have the oxygen cycle for oxygen. So they are found in the carbon cycle, and so it's very important. The carbon cycle is important, all right, in the survival of organisms. Now, components, there are components in organic compounds of plants, such as proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. And these elements are also components used to synthesize sugars, such as glucose, C6H12O6. Glucose contains carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. So we need these three elements to synthesize sugars that form the types of food that can form food, organic food substances for organisms. So effects of deficiency. If we don't have carbon, oxygen, hydrogen in the environment, then or in the plants, photosynthesis cannot occur, right? And there will be no production of sugar. Also, there will be no production of oxygen, which is a byproduct of photosynthesis, right? Less or no oxygen will be released by the plants for respiration of organisms. Furthermore, no glucose will be produced when we don't have carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. So the plant will experience stunted growth and also death. The leaves will look very pale and small, and then the plant will die in the end. So the growth of the plant is also stunted, meaning it's small in size. Now, another important element is nitrogen, which was tested in SPM 2021, the first year of the KSSM syllabus. So you have to know the functions very well. What is the function of nitrogen? It is used in the formation of the green pigment called chlorophyll in the chloroplast. This chlorophyll is used to absorb sunlight or light for photosynthesis. So if the plant cannot form the chlorophyll, okay, if there's a deficiency of nitrogen, plants cannot synthesize chlorophyll, then there will be less chlorophyll in the leaves and there will be chlorosis or yellowing of the leaves because less chlorophyll is formed. Okay, so chlorosis means yellowing of the leaves. Now, nitrogen, as we know from the Form 4 syllabus, is a component of proteins. So proteins contain a few elements, CHON, and then you will also have sulfur and phosphorus, okay, some of them. So nitrogen is essential for the formation of proteins in plants and also for formation of nucleic acids, that is DNA and RNA, which have nitrogenous bases, and then also in enzymes, because enzymes are proteins too, right? So they need this element nitrogen for the synthesis, okay? Plants need nitrogen for synthesis of enzymes that are used in photosynthesis and respiration, okay? So if there's a lack of nitrogen, chlorophyll is not formed, then chlorosis occurs, which is the yellowing of leaves, as seen here. Then underlying leaves fall off, the leaves that are below will fall off. Protein synthesis will be disrupted because there's no nitrogen for the synthesis of proteins, and the plant will experience stunted growth, meaning the plant will be very small in size and the leaves will also be very small. So potassium. Potassium is used for protein synthesis too, right? And carbohydrate metabolism. Okay, and then so nitrogen and potassium, they are needed for protein synthesis. So potassium is a cofactor for enzymes and also helps to maintain plant rigidity. This came out in 2021 too, the function of potassium, okay, for protein synthesis and carbohydrate metabolism. Just remember one fact here, at least one fact. So without potassium, protein synthesis will be disrupted, and a very unique symptom of deficiency or effect of deficiency is that the leaf edges will turn yellowish, okay, at the edges here or at the tips here. There's premature death of the plants finally. Calcium. Calcium, the function is to forms the main component of the middle lamella, that means the part between the cell walls of two cells, right? And form the main components of the middle lamella, cell wall, and also spindle fibers, which are produced during cell division to separate the sister chromatids, right? So plant cells, they don't have centrioles, but they can still produce the spindle fibers. But they need to have calcium in order to form the spindle fibers, okay? Because calcium is the main component of the spindle fibers. Now, effects of deficiency, stunted growth, and one very unique effect or symptom of deficiency is that the leaves will become distorted. So the shape of the leaf is no longer normal and it looks a bit crumpled. Okay, the leaves look distorted, lobed, and crumpled. Okay, some of the leaf edges may curl inwards or curl in a certain direction. Parts of between the leaf veins will turn yellowish. Okay, so distorted leaves is a sign of this. Is one sign of calcium deficiency. The next macronutrient is magnesium. So magnesium is a very important macronutrient in plants because it is the structural component of the chlorophyll molecule, as we can see from the formula for chlorophyll A, right? You can see that there is magnesium in chlorophyll A. So the lack of magnesium will cause the leaf to turn yellow. Parts between the green leaf veins are yellow. So the leaf veins are still green, but the other parts are yellow. And this is a sign of chlorosis, all right, the yellowing of leaves. So why does it occur? Because if there's a lack of magnesium in the plant will produce less chlorophyll. There'll be a lack of chlorophyll in the leaves, and the leaves are not green but yellow instead. Now, secondly, magnesium activates plant enzymes, and thirdly, it is involved in carbohydrate metabolism. So other effects of deficiency are red spots on the leaf and lobed leaves. Lobe leaves means that the leaf is not shaped like normal, and there may be some divisions here, and so there will be some projections sticking out of the leaf. Okay, the shape is not normal anymore. Right, next, let's go on to phosphorus, P for phosphorus. So it was tested in SPM 2021, the function of phosphorus was tested. So phosphorus is important for the synthesis of nucleic acids, ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and phospholipids in the plasma membrane. Okay, so nucleic acids are DNA and RNA in this case. So we have already discussed in the previous slide the composition of all these compounds. They have phosphorus in them. Okay, so that means the plant needs to have phosphorus to synthesize all these organic compounds. So it's very important. It's a very important macronutrient. And secondly, phosphorus stimulates healthy root development. All right, so this is again an important function of phosphorus. So if there is a deficiency in phosphorus, deficiency of phosphorus in plants, the plant will experience unhealthy root growth. The roots may be shorter and also sparse, not so much as in the healthy plant, right? And then phosphorus is also used as coenzymes in photosynthesis and respiration, right? So effects of deficiency, as we said, unhealthy root growth, formation of dark green and dull colored leaves. So the color of the leaf is not like a normal green, the normal green color of the leaf, but it tends to be darker green. And one more symptom that is quite unique is that there are red or purple spots that appear on the older leaves. So the leaf may look a bit reddish in color. Okay. Now, sulfur. Sulfur, the function is that it is a component of amino acids that are then used to synthesize proteins, and it is a constituent of vitamin B and coenzymes. Now, the lack of it causes leaves to turn yellow. That means, again, chlorosis. All right. So here we see the symptom of chlorosis. Okay. So here is a summary of the functions of the macronutrients. Just one or two functions in case you are asked in the exams. What is the function of each of the macronutrients here? Then you can give answers like this. This will help you in your recall. Okay. So for macronutrients, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, they function as components, or they are used for the synthesis of sugars, proteins, and lipids, which are the organic compounds in plants. Nitrogen is used for the synthesis of chlorophyll, proteins, enzymes, and nucleic acids. Potassium is used for the synthesis of proteins, and they act as cofactors for enzymes. Calcium is a component and is used for the synthesis of cell walls, middle lamella in the tissues, and spindle fibers in plants. Magnesium is a component, or it is used for the synthesis of the chlorophyll molecule. Phosphorus is used for the synthesis of nucleic acids such as DNA and RNA, adenosine triphosphate, ATP, phospholipids, and it also stimulates healthy growth development, healthy root development, or healthy growth of roots. Sulfur is a component, or is used for the synthesis of amino acids, coenzymes, and vitamin B. So after studying about the macronutrients and micronutrients, it is fun to test ourselves and look around at the plants in a garden, right? And try to deduce whether they are suffering from any macronutrient or micronutrient deficiencies. For example, let's find out, okay, let's test ourselves. What macronutrient is lacking? In this photo of lettuce leaves. So lettuce is a type of vegetable that we eat in salads, right? It's usually eaten raw. And here you can see that the lettuce leaves are still green, but there are spots here, right, of a different color. Now, what macronutrient is lacking here? Based on what you have studied earlier about macronutrients. Okay, the answer is phosphorus deficiency in the lettuce, right? Due to the presence of the red or purple spots on the leaf. Sometimes the whole leaf can turn reddish color, all right? So here, the plant is suffering from phosphorus deficiency because there are red or purple spots on the leaves. This is a sign of phosphorus deficiency. Let's look at the second symptom or effect of deficiency. In this photo B, what is the macronutrient that is lacking in this coconut palm? Right, now you can see that the leaves are yellowish in color, and this is a symptom of chlorosis. That means there's a lack of the chlorophyll, the green pigment chlorophyll in the plant that's responsible for carrying out photosynthesis. So this plant is lacking in the macronutrient nitrogen, right? So this coconut palm shows nitrogen deficiency because you can see the overall condition of the plant is that there's chlorosis all over, or the yellow of leaves. Let's look at this photo C here. Now this papaya tree, the leaves of this papaya tree shows another type of macronutrient deficiency. So can you guess or deduce what it is based on what we have discussed earlier? Yes, it is potassium deficiency symptom. Okay, these papaya leaves show potassium deficiency symptoms because of the yellowing of the leaves at the leaf edges only, not the whole leaf, right? So it starts with the yellowing of the leaves at the leaf edges. This is a unique symptom of potassium deficiency in the plant. Now, lastly, let's look at this plant, this photo here. So this tree is a citrus tree that citrus trees produce limes and oranges and so forth, all right, the sour fruits. So what is the deficiency here due to? Lack of what micronutrient? The answer is zinc. So these citrus leaves show zinc deficiency symptoms because there are spots of chlorosis or yellow parts in between the leaf veins. The leaf veins are still green, as you can see here, all right? But in between the leaf veins, there are yellow spots. So this is a symptom of zinc deficiency. Okay, let's continue to test yourself by trying these two objective questions here. The first one, the following statements explain the functions of two macronutrients, X and Y, in plants. What are the macronutrients? So you have to know the functions of the macronutrients well. Now, for X, it is involved in the synthesis of nucleic acids and ATP. Also, it stimulates healthy root development. Whereas for Y, it is the structural component of the chlorophyll molecule. Right, so you can pause the video for a while and try these two questions. And after that, we will discuss the results. Right, so let's look at this first question here. What is X and Y? Now, for X, it is involved in the synthesis of nucleic acids and ATP, right? So it could be phosphorus, because ATP contains phosphorus in the phosphate group. But the second function really tells you what X is. It stimulates healthy root development. So this is true for phosphorus. It stimulates healthy root development. Secondly, the structural component of the chlorophyll molecule, it could be nitrogen or magnesium, all right? Because nitrogen is also part of the chlorophyll molecule, an element in the chlorophyll molecule. But since we are going for phosphorus for X, then Y could be magnesium. Okay, so normally when we talk about the structural component of chlorophyll, we refer to magnesium as the main component or the important component of the chlorophyll molecule. Right, so the answer is D, right? Now let's look at the second question. Okay, the answer has been given, but never mind. So let's look at the question. A gardener notices that his plants have distorted leaves that curl inwards. Distorted leaves, only one mineral or element or macronutrient causes this specific symptom when it is lacking in a plant. Now, the growth of the plant is also stunted. Analysis of the soil shows it is deficient in a macronutrient Z. So what is Z, and what is the substance that can be added to the soil to correct the condition? So firstly, we know that distorted leaves that curl inwards is a symptom of lack of calcium in the plant, right? Now, does this action, adding pounded eggshells, help to correct the condition so that there is more calcium in the soil and to correct the deficiency in the plant? Yes, because eggshells contain a lot of calcium carbonate. So if we add pounded eggshells in the powder form to the soil, it can supply the soil with calcium that can be absorbed by the plants, all right, to correct the condition. So the answer is C. We have already discussed the macronutrients. Now let's go on to the micronutrients, which are needed in smaller amounts or trace amounts in plants for healthy growth and development. So the micronutrients are ferrum or iron, chlorine, manganese, copper, nickel, zinc, molybdenum, and boron. Now let's discuss the functions and effects of deficiency of the micronutrients. So micronutrients are needed in smaller quantities compared to the macronutrients, and they are less important than the macronutrients, all right? But you still have to know some of the important functions and effects of deficiency, starting with chlorine. So chlorine is important in equilibrium of osmotic pressure in cells and in reactions of photosynthesis, right? So osmotic pressure in cells is dependent on the solutes in the cells and in the cell. So chlorine is used to help maintain the osmotic pressure in cells and the concentration of solutes in cells. Okay, so that is a equilibrium or balance of the osmotic pressure in the cells. Now, without chlorine or with a lack of chlorine, the plants will wilt and there will be slower root growth. Leaves will also undergo chlorosis and there's less food production. Okay, so chlorosis is the yellowing of the leaves as seen here. Now, iron is a very important micronutrient, and we have to know this fact. It acts as a cofactor in chlorophyll synthesis. Okay, so remember this. Iron is a very important micronutrient. So it acts as a cofactor in chlorophyll synthesis. So cofactors are chemical substances that help in the action of the enzymes. Okay, help the enzymes to function well. So in this way, it also helps in the synthesis of chlorophyll. So without it, the young leaves will also become yellowish because there will be a lack of chlorophyll. Less chlorophyll is synthesized, right? So again, there is chlorosis. Now, manganese activates photosynthetic enzymes and is important for cell respiration and nitrogen metabolism. So the effects of deficiency is that there's a network of dark green veins, as seen here, with a background of light green, and there are light brown or gray spots in between the leaf veins. So for boron, boron helps the roots in calcium ion uptake and sucrose translocation, or in the transport of sucrose, okay, which is produced after photosynthesis has occurred. All right, so the plant will produce sucrose from the glucose that is produced in photosynthesis, and then the sucrose has to be transported from one part of the plant to the other through the phloem. So boron helps the roots in the calcium ion uptake into the roots and also sucrose, the translocation or sucrose transport. It helps in carbohydrate metabolism and helps in germination of pollen. Now, the effects of deficiency: death of terminal buds. Terminal buds are the shoots, young shoots at the tips of the stems. Okay, so death of terminal buds and abnormal growth. Leaves become thicker, rolled up, and fragile. Now, these facts have not exactly been tested before, but we still have to know a summary of it, at least. Especially, the most important micronutrient in this list is ferrum. So you still have to know the functions and effects for micronutrients. Next, we have zinc, the micronutrient zinc, which is important in leaf formation and synthesis of the hormone called auxin, which helps in the growth of the plant. And zinc is a cofactor in carbohydrate metabolism. That means it helps in the function of the enzymes, helps enzymes to function better, right? Now, effects of deficiency. So leaf surface becomes spotted with chlorosis spots. All right, so there are yellow spots on the leaf in between the veins, and there's stunted growth. So lack of zinc can cause chlorosis or the yellowing of leaves. Copper involved in nitrogen metabolism and photosynthesis and important for growth reproduction and flower formation. So effects of deficiency. Death of young shoot apex, the shoot at the top of the plant, okay, will die. Young shoot at the top of the plant will die. And then brown spots on terminal leaves and plants become stunted. The growth will be stunted. Nickel, a component of plant enzymes involved in the breakdown of urea to become ammonia, which can be used by plants. So lack of it will cause stunted growth, and this will also reduce crop production. There's a burnt effect at the end of the leaves if there's a lack of nickel. This is due to urea accumulation, all right, because the urea cannot be broken down to become ammonia when there's a lack of nickel. Molybdenum is involved in nitrogen fixation in legumes and in nitrate reduction during protein synthesis. So nitrogen fixation is a process whereby the nitrogen in the air can be converted into a form like nitrates, okay, in the plants. So this will be studying in another chapter on the nitrogen cycle, probably chapter 8 of the Form 5 syllabus. Now, effects of lack of molybdenum is chlorosis. That means the yellowing of leaves in between the matured leaf veins. Leaf color becomes pale green due to could be due to lack of chlorophyll, and it reduces the lack of molybdenum will reduce the crop production. So here is a summary of one of the important functions of each micronutrient. Very quickly, let's read through it. Chlorine is important in equilibrium of osmotic pressure in cells. Iron acts as a cofactor in chlorophyll synthesis. Manganese activates photosynthetic enzymes. Boron helps roots in calcium ion uptake and sucrose translocation. Zinc needed for leaf formation and synthesis of the hormone auxin. Copper is used in nitrogen metabolism and photosynthesis. Nickel is important as a component of plant enzymes, and molybdenum is involved in nitrogen fixation. Refer to nitrogen cycle in another chapter. We have finished discussing the macronutrients and micronutrients. Now let's look at some important questions that may be asked in the exam. So here's an SPM forecast question. State 3 nutrients in which a lack of the nutrient causes chlorosis in a plant. 3 marks. Now we know that chlorosis means the yellowing of leaves due to a lack of chlorophyll, as seen in the photos here and here, right? The yellowing of leaves due to a lack of chlorophyll. So can you recall back 3 nutrients which are important to the plant, in which a lack of the nutrient can cause chlorosis? Right, so yes, here we have 3 nutrients or more. They are magnesium, iron, nitrogen. These are the 3 main nutrients that are important to prevent chlorosis, but there are others like chlorine, zinc, and sulfur. Okay, so magnesium, iron, nitrogen, chlorine, zinc, and sulfur. Think of the acronym mini cheeses. Mini, M for magnesium, I for iron, N for nitrogen, Ni for nitrogen, C for chlorine or CH for chlorine, Z for zinc, and S for sulfur. Mini cheeses, right? Next, let's answer very quickly some important questions in this formative exercise 3.1. Firstly, what is the main difference between macronutrients and micronutrients used in the growth of plants? 1 mark. Now you can try these questions first and then and pause the video while you're trying the questions, and then later we'll look at the answers. Okay? Okay, right. Now the main difference between macronutrients and micronutrients. Macronutrients are required by plants in large quantities, while micronutrients are required by plants in smaller quantities. Number 2, state 3 nutrients which can cause chlorosis if there's a lack of these nutrients. Nitrogen is the main one. It's important for the synthesis of chlorophyll. Then iron also. Iron acts as a cofactor in chlorophyll synthesis. And then we have chlorine, and then we have zinc. Okay. Now, number 3, why do farmers use NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium fertilizers? Okay, the reason is because generally NPK fertilizers, like the one shown here, stimulate healthy growth and development of plants. So, for example, N is for nitrogen. So nitrogen stimulates leaf development, and it's also necessary in the formation of chlorophyll, or the synthesis of chlorophyll for photosynthesis. How about phosphorus? P, phosphorus. Phosphorus is used in the synthesis of proteins and stimulates healthy root growth. We know that in the chapter 4 of the Form 4 syllabus, we have studied the organic compounds such as proteins. They contain phosphorus, right? So phosphorus is used in the synthesis of proteins and stimulates healthy root development. Whereas potassium is involved in protein synthesis too and acts as cofactors for enzymes. So potassium is also involved in the development of the whole plant, including the flowers and the fruits. Fourthly, roots and leaves are medium to transport nutrients in plants. With your knowledge in biology, explain this statement. The roots and leaves are the medium to transport the nutrients. So roots act as the transportation medium that absorb water and nutrients like the macronutrients or mineral ions in the soil and transport them to the stem and then to other parts of the plant. Okay? Transport them upwards in the stem to other parts of the plant. So the roots are the ones that absorb the water and nutrients, right? And then the leaves. Now, the stomata on leaves allow carbon dioxide from atmosphere to diffuse into the leaves. So carbon dioxide contains carbon and oxygen, CO2, which are actually the macronutrients used by plants to produce glucose through photosynthesis. So we've already discussed the macronutrients and the micronutrients. Lastly, we're going to discuss the culture solution. Specifically, it's called the Knops culture solution, in which plants can be grown, all right, as shown in this picture. So let's find out more about the Knops culture solution. Let's find out more about culture solution. So a culture solution is actually a solution of chemicals that are put together and used to study the importance of nutrients for plant growth. Now, the usual culture solution that we refer to is called the Knops solution. So the definition for a culture solution known as Knops solution, what is it? So a culture solution known as Knops solution contains all the nutrients, that means the macronutrients and the micronutrients, which we sometimes call the trace elements, all right, that are needed by healthy plants for growth. So a complete culture solution was prepared by the chemist Wilhelm Knop in 1859. Okay, that's why it's called Knops solution. So this is the composition of a complete Knops solution. We'll have a look later. So Julius Sachs and Wilhelm Knop were the two botanists who carried out experiments to determine the role of macronutrients such as nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus in plants for growth of plants. Now let's have a look at the nutrients that are dissolved in the Knops culture solution. Okay, so in 1000 cm³ of distilled water or 1 liter of distilled water, we can dissolve all these chemicals to produce the Knops culture solution, a complete Knops culture solution. Okay, the first nutrient is calcium nitrate, CaNO3 2. We use 0.8 grams of calcium nitrate. And then we also measure 0.2 grams of potassium nitrate, 0.2 grams of potassium dihydrogen phosphate, 0.2 grams of magnesium sulfate, and a trace or a bit of iron phosphate, which is iron is a micronutrient. And then all these are dissolved in 1 liter of water or 1000 cm³ or 1000 ml of water. Okay, so notice here that the various nutrients provide the macronutrients for the plants. Calcium nitrate provides calcium ions and nitrogen, okay, to the plants. Potassium nitrate supplies the potassium ion, okay, as the macronutrient. Potassium dihydrogen phosphate supplies potassium and phosphorus. Magnesium sulfate supplies magnesium and sulfur. Iron phosphate supplies iron and phosphorus to the plant. Now, in the next video, we'll be discussing experiment 3.1 that's related to this topic. So experiment 3.1 is found on page 63 in the digital textbook. The objective is to study the effects of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium ratios on plant growth. Basically, we are going to prepare different culture bottles with different culture solutions. So one of the culture solutions will be the complete Knop's culture solution with all the macronutrients and micronutrients present. But there are other culture solutions where there is a macronutrient lacking in each culture solution, right? So we're going to observe the growth of corn seedlings in the different culture solutions in a period of 1 month. And after a period of 1 month, we're going to observe what are the symptoms of deficiency, if there are any. So the whole corn seedling is placed in the culture bottle with its roots immersed in the culture solution. The cotton wool will help to place the corn seedling in a vertical position, and then the bottle is attached to an air pump, okay, so that air can be pumped into the culture solution to provide oxygen for the respiration of roots. Okay, so let's find out more in the next video, okay, about this the procedure of experiment 3.1, the results, and then we will also discuss the questions related to this experiment. So thanks for viewing, and please do share, like, and subscribe if you haven't done so. And see you again in the next video.